Hi, my name is Nigel Cawthorne. I'm the author of over 100 books. They include some serious stuff like the Bamboo Cage, which got me called to testify to the US Senate. It's the first non-fiction investigation into whether American prisoners of war were held behind in Southeast Asia after the end of the Vietnam War. I followed that with the Iron Cage, which demonstrated that 31,000 British and 20,000 American prisoners of war, Germans in 1945, were not liberated when their camps were overrun by the Red Army, but sent into Soviet labor camps where they perished. Nevertheless, the thing I am most proud of in my writing career is my Sex Lives series, which are now in 26 languages. It began with the sex lives of the kings and queens of England, close to home here, as I'm speaking to you from England. Was a bit of an old lefty, and I knew that during the French Revolution, the French royal family were brought down by books and pamphlets satirising their sex lives, and I thought I could do the same thing here. Hasn't worked out quite that way. But when I first proposed the book, several publishers turned it down on the grounds that they would find themselves locked in the Tower of London, which I thought would have been great publicity. It goes through the usual suspects. Henry VIII, who was thought of as a great stud because he had 6 wives. Unfortunately, he complained that he was impotent most of the time. We have the great English hero, Richard the Lionheart, who in fact was gay. He spent more of his time bounding around the Middle East with his rough crusaders than home here with his queen, who eventually left him. And there's wonderful stuff, of course, about our great Charles II, the Merry Monarch, though he complained to the Venetian ambassador that his brother, James, who became James II of England, had more lovers than the two of them put together. And unfortunately, he said to the Venetian ambassador, James is cursed, he only sleeps with ugly women. James retorted that at night all cats are grey. In fact, when James fell from power, he was the last Catholic king of England. He fell from power after the Battle of the Boyne, which began a lot of trouble in Ireland, you will recall. He complained that he'd lost the battle because he spent too much time in the company of women. The book includes a passage on the sex life of our own dear Queen. Anyway, when that book came out, it did rather well, and a friend of mine suggested that the natural follow-up would be a book on the sex life of the President of the United States. I suggested this to the publisher, who said, actually, the Americans don't have much of a sense of humour when it comes to their president. So I said, okay, let me do Sex Lives of the Popes. He said, well, if you can do that, you can do anything. So it became almost like a bet between me and him. I went to the Great British Library and started researching the book. For the first 2 weeks, I got nowhere. And then the floodgates opened. There's some fabulous stories. I'm sure you all know about the Borgia popes, but there was, in the 9th century, there was a period called the Papal Pornocracy, when a mother and daughter alternately put their various lovers and children on the papal throne. My favourite pope was John the 23rd. Now, there's been 2 John the 23rds. The Catholic Church often name a pope, give a recent pope the same name as an old one who's been particularly bad, to cover up the sins of the former one. The first one was deposed by the Council of Constance in 1415. He began his career as a pirate in Naples, but he then realised that there was more money in the church. He became a priest when he rose to become papal legate in Bologna, where he had a palace with 100 concubines in it. He was a very busy boy. Anyway, he rose to be pope. There was a schism at the time. There were actually 3 popes. And to thin it down a bit, he was arrested and taken to Constance, where there was a convocation of all the Catholic priests from all over Europe. And it's also said that every prostitute from Europe was there, because the town was full of single men with money. Anyway, he was charged with 53 capital offences. He admitted 4, which were murder, incest, adultery, and of all things from Pope, atheism. He was deposed, fined, and jailed. He bribed his way out of jail, and he rose to become a cardinal again. You can't keep a good man down. Now, you might think that these things ended in medieval times, and that the current popes have been rather more sanguine when it came to sex. However, the pope before the current one, John Paul II, had a child, and in fact had a grandchild when he was in the Vatican. It's a rather nice story. I'm sure that you know that before World War II, John Paul II had been an actor and a playwright, and he wrote poetry as well. If you read his poetry, he writes love poetry, you can tell that he knew what he was talking about. He had quite a few girlfriends. Anyway, during World War II, he joined the Polish resistance, and his group was smuggling Jews out of Poland. He met and fell in love with a young Jewish girl. Of course, they couldn't get married because the country was under Nazi domination at the time, but they had a private ceremony exchange of rings. She fell pregnant. In postnatal depression, she left the safe house and was grabbed by the Nazis and went to a death camp. He was left with a 6-week-old baby daughter, which he took to the local convent to be brought up by the nuns. And it's said that he became a priest to be near the child. So it's a lovely story because you think better of him after I told the story. However, I never can leave it quite there, because it seems to me that there's a problem with this tale, which is, once you've tasted the forbidden fruit, how do you give it up? Now, I was suggesting that during his time there were naked nuns cavorting around the Vatican. However, it may explain where he went round kissing airports. After the sex lives of the popes came out, which sold terrifically well in Catholic countries. I mean, it was a bestseller in Brazil. I then got to write Sex Lives of the US Presidents, which actually came out in Russian before it came out in the United States. It only came out in the United States because of President Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. I'm convinced that he must have got hold of a copy of the book, read it, and thought, this English author needs some help. Get down there, Monica. Anyway, it got me on every chat show in America. I was on the Joan Rivers show with it, and people would always ask me, first of all, about Clinton. Well, I didn't know any more about Clinton than anybody else. I mean, I knew about James Buchanan, who was the first gay president. I knew all sorts of interesting stuff. But I would always begin by saying that George Washington set a standard that not even Slick Willie could live up to. His first love was a Native American school called Bright Lightning. He then had a long affair with the wife of his best friend. He married an older woman for her money, and the War of Independence was largely an excuse to play away from home. In fact, there was a huge sex scandal during the War of Independence called the Washwoman Kate Affair. Washington had a congressman procuring young women for him, so you have to be a bit careful what you say on American TV. So I would say that, so when he came back from fighting the British, there'd be someone to administer the comfort of love to him. I think they knew what I was talking about. Anyway, I would then say, look, I don't want to bore your viewers and listeners, because there's so much of this stuff. I don't upset your school children, because I know they're all taught that George Washington died because he'd been out horseback riding in the snow, he'd caught a chill, it turned to pneumonia, and he died. It's not true. He caught the chill in unheated slave huts with a black woman. That is true.